You were in the middle of something, not finished, not at a natural stopping point. And yet here you are. You did not plan to stop. You did not schedule this moment. Something pulled you out of the current you were moving in, and before you could think about it clearly, you were already here, already listening, already still. That is not a small thing. That is not the algorithm. That is not coincidence dressed up in digital clothing. What just happened to you was arranged. It was set in motion. Long before this moment appeared on your screen, and the fact that you stopped, right here, right now, in the middle of everything else, is the first confirmation of what this entire message is going to say to you. You need to understand something before we go any further. God does not wait for convenient moments. He does not hold his voice until your schedule clears, or your life settles, or the noise quiets down enough for you to finally be ready. He interrupts. He reaches into the middle of the ordinary and pulls the chosen ones out of it, not gently, not apologetically, but with the full authority of a father who knows exactly where his child is and exactly what his child needs to hear. That is what happened to you today. You were mid-sentence in your own story, and heaven stepped in and said, "Stop. I need to speak to you before you take the next step." So before anything else, before this message has even fully opened before you, I want you to sit with the weight of that. You were called here, not invited in a passive, take it or leave it way. Called, pulled, stopped. And if you have any awareness at all of the season you are currently standing in, if you have any sense of the decision that is hovering at the edge of your life right now, then you already know somewhere beneath all the noise why this moment matters. Something in you recognized this before your mind caught up. Something in you went quiet the instant you arrived. That quietness is not nothing. That is your spirit responding to the voice of the one who made you. You have been in a long stretch of movement without clear direction. You have been doing the next thing, and then the next thing, not because you had a vision guiding each step, but because stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. Somewhere in the last season, you learned to stay in motion as a form of survival, and so you have been moving, pushing, carrying, holding things together, pressing through, making it work. And almost no one around you knows how much effort that has taken. Almost no one has stopped to ask you what you are carrying beneath the performance of progress. But heaven has not been fooled by the movement. Heaven sees the weight inside the motion. Heaven sees you. And today, in the middle of something that was not this, heaven interrupted you, not to add another weight, not to give you another assignment before you have recovered from the last one. Heaven interrupted you because there is a word that you need to hear before you make the decision that is quietly waiting at the edge of your awareness. Before you give up on the thing you have been holding. Before you walk away from the place where your breakthrough is buried. Before you decide that silence of God means the absence of God. Before you do that, heaven needed you to stop, and you did. Comment, "I hear you, Lord," in the comments right now if you feel that this interruption was meant for you. Let that be the first declaration you make in this moment, a simple acknowledgement that you did not end up here by accident, and you are willing to receive what this message carries. If this word has already begun to move something in you, know that this ministry exists entirely to reach people at exactly this kind of moment. People who were mid-sentence in their own lives and needed to hear heaven's voice break through. If you feel led to support the work that makes these messages possible, you are welcome to do so freely. Every contribution, whatever its size, helps ensure that this word keeps moving and keeps reaching the people who need it most. There is no pressure here, only an open door. Now stay with me, because what heaven interrupted you for is bigger than you have allowed yourself to believe. The story of where you have been is not finished. It has not even reached its most important chapter yet. And before you decide anything about the path ahead, you need to hear this word from beginning to end. You need to hear it because it was prepared for you, not for a general audience. For you. For the person who stopped in the middle of something because something stronger than their own will pull them here. That person is you. And what God has to say to that person is going to change the way they see everything that has happened, everything that is happening, and everything that is still to come. There is something you have been carrying that was never supposed to be a solo burden. You picked it up somewhere in the last few years, and you have been walking with it so long that you have almost forgotten what it felt like to move without it. It has shaped the way you sleep, or the way you do not sleep. It has shaped the conversations you avoid and the ones you enter with your guard already up. It has shaped the version of yourself you present to the world, because somewhere you decided that if people knew the full weight of what you were holding, they would not understand it, or worse, they would not stay. So you learned to carry it quietly. You learned to smile at the right times. You learned to answer, "I am fine," before anyone could ask something deeper. Because the deeper question felt like a door you could not afford to open in public. But you are not fine, not in the way that word is supposed to mean. You are functional. You are capable. You are still showing up, still producing, still being what others need you to be. But underneath all of that, there is a kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with how long you have been doing this alone. The weight of unanswered questions. The weight of a future that was supposed to look different by now. The weight of watching people around you move forward while you feel like you have been standing in the same place, circling the same mountain, asking the same prayers into what sometimes feels like an empty ceiling. Heaven sees that, and heaven is not moved to judgment by it. Heaven is moved to nearness. Because what you are carrying was never designed to be carried alone, and the fact that you have been doing it anyway says something extraordinary about your strength. But it was never the plan. It was never the intention of the one who made you that you would white-knuckle your way through the hardest seasons without being held. You were not created for isolation. You were not built for the silence of going unseen in the middle of your deepest need. You were built for the kind of presence that does not leave when things get complicated, and that presence has not left you. It has been closer than you have been able to feel. You need to understand what has happened in this season. The isolation you have experienced was not rejection from God. The silence you have moved through was not absence. The stripping away of certain voices, certain relationships, certain comforts, that was not abandonment. It was protection. Because not everything that felt close to you was healthy for you, and not everyone who was comfortable to be around was building into your purpose. Some of what left you was taking more from you than it was giving, and your Father, who is not careless with his children, began to remove it. Not cruelly, not randomly, with the precision of a gardener who knows exactly which branches to prune so that the tree can finally bear the weight of the fruit it was always meant to carry. But when the pruning comes, it does not feel like gardening. It feels like loss. It feels like rejection. It feels like the evidence that you must have done something wrong, that you must be less than you thought you were, that the life you imagined for yourself was simply not available to a person like you. You took each departure and each silence and each closed door as a verdict. You carried the weight of those verdicts on top of everything else you were already holding. And the pile grew heavier, and the road grew longer, And the version of yourself who once moved with confidence and expectation became quieter, more cautious, more reluctant to believe that the word over your life was still standing. I need you to hear this clearly, and I need you to let it reach the place inside you that has been most damaged by the weight of this season. The word over your life is still standing, not in spite of what you have been through, not merely surviving the pressure you have been under. Standing, unshaken, unrevised, still carrying every promise that was spoken over you before the hard years came. The weight you have been carrying has not changed what was written about you before you were born. The silence you have moved through has not erased the voice that called you by name. You were not designed to carry this alone, and you were not designed to carry it forever. What has been on your shoulders is about to shift, not because you finally performed well enough to deserve it, but because the season of the burden was always meant to end, and the one who assigned your purpose has not forgotten the timeline. Every force that has ever moved against you has failed. Think about that before you move past it. Think about the moments where something was clearly trying to close a door that God had opened, where something was working to silence a voice that heaven had commissioned, where something arrived to dismantle a life that had been set apart before birth. Think about how many times it looked like it was working, how many times the opposition had the weight of evidence on its side, how many times the numbers, the circumstances, the closed doors, the betrayals, the silence, the delay, all of it lined up in a way that made walking away seem not just reasonable but wise, and yet you are still here. The word over your life is still intact. The assignment has not been revoked. Whatever was sent to cancel you did not finish the job, and it never will. There is a reason for that. It is not luck. It is not resilience alone, though your resilience has been remarkable. The reason that nothing sent against you has achieved a permanent result is that what was placed on your life was sealed by a hand that nothing in this world has the authority to unseal. When God calls a person, He does not call them and then wait to see if the circumstances will cooperate. He calls them, He seals the call, and then He works all things, including the opposition, including the delay, including the suffering. He works all of it toward the fulfillment of what He already decided. You were not called provisionally. You were not chosen on a trial basis. The selection was permanent. The assignment is irrevocable, and everything that has tried to argue otherwise has been arguing against something it does not have the power to overturn. The enemy understood what was placed on your life before you did. That is important. The opposition you have faced in this season was not random. Resistance is not evenly distributed. It concentrates around things that carry weight, around lives that are positioned to shift something significant, around people whose obedience could alter the direction of others. The intensity of what you have faced is not evidence against your calling. It is evidence for it. If nothing of value were placed on your life, nothing would have worked so hard to stop you. The war around you is proportional to the weight of what you carry. Comment, I choose my crown right now if you believe that what was placed on your life cannot be canceled. Let that declaration be more than words. Let it be the moment you stop treating the opposition as a verdict and start seeing it as confirmation. This ministry continues because people who have been reached by this word choose to help carry it further. Everything you hear produced through this channel, every message prepared and released, takes real time, real effort, and real resources. Your support, given freely, and only if it comes from a genuine place in you, is what makes it possible to release a new word every week, to maintain the quality of this work, and to reach the thousands of people who are still out there in their own long, seasons waiting for a word that speaks directly to where they are. If you feel led to be part of that, the link is available to you. There is no obligation here, no expectation. Only gratitude for those who feel moved to give. Now hear this. The assignment that has been on your life since before you were born has survived everything. It has survived your mistakes. It has survived your seasons of doubt. It has survived the moments when you did not pray the way you should have, did not believe the way you wanted to, did not show up the way you had planned. It has survived other people's opinions about your worth and your limit. It has survived seasons when you agreed with those opinions. It has survived your own self. Abandonment, none of that canceled it. Because an assignment sealed by God is not contingent on perfect performance. It is not contingent on flawless faith. It is not contingent on a clean record or an undamaged testimony. It is contingent on the faithfulness of the one who gave it, and that faithfulness does not waver. You have been waiting for a sign that the assignment is still yours. You have been looking for evidence that the door is still open, that the word is still active, that heaven has not moved on from you while you were struggling to move toward it. Here is the sign you have been waiting for. You are still here. The word has not been lifted. The hunger in you for something greater has not died despite everything that tried to kill it. That hunger is not nostalgia. It is not wishful thinking. It is the life of an assignment that refuses to go quiet, pressing up through everything that tried to bury it, reminding you that you have not yet done what you were put here to do. There is something you have needed to hear about the wilderness, not a polished version of it, not a comfortable reassurance that it was all beautiful in some abstract way, but the plain truth about what those years were actually for. Because you have been in one. You have been in a season that did not look like the promises you were given. A season that felt too long, too empty, too silent, too stripped. A season where the people who seemed to move forward with ease made the stillness of your own life feel like failure. And without anyone telling you otherwise, you began to write a story about yourself in that silence. A story that said the wilderness meant you were forgotten. A story that said the delay meant disqualification. A story that said if you had been truly chosen, things would have looked very different by now. That story is wrong. And the wilderness you have been in is not what you have believed it to be. It was not the graveyard of your potential. It was the training ground for it. Every desert season in the lives of people who were called to carry something significant had the same structure. The stripping came first, then the building, then the sending. The stripping was not punishment. It was surgical. God cannot give significant weight to hands that are still clutching lesser things. He cannot entrust great influence to a life that is still being shaped by the approval of the wrong voices. He cannot send someone into a defining assignment before they have been emptied of the version of themselves that would have mishandled it. The stripping was not abandonment. The stripping was preparation. Think about what the wilderness actually took from you. Not what you wished you still had, but what the wilderness removed, that if you are honest, needed to go. The relationships that were draining you of more than they were giving. The version of confidence that was rooted in external validation rather than internal identity. The plans you had formed from your own ambition rather than from genuine calling. The pace you had set for yourself that looked like productivity but was actually avoidance. The wilderness came in, and one by one it removed what could not come with you into the next season. Not because God was being harsh with you, because God was being precise, because the person who enters the next chapter of your life cannot afford to carry what the wilderness took. And while the wilderness stripped, it was also building something in you, that cannot be manufactured any other way. You cannot develop the kind of depth that moves people by reading about it. It is only formed in sustained seasons of suffering, waiting, silence, and choosing to trust what you cannot see. The authority that will mark your words and your steps in the next season is not the product of talent or training alone. It is the product of what you survived. Every time you chose to stay, when leaving felt easier, every time you chose to believe when doubt had more evidence on its side, every time you lifted your hands in a season that gave you no visible reason to, something was being deposited in you that cannot be faked and cannot be replicated. You were being made strong in the places you were broken. Moses was 40 years in the desert before he was ready. Joseph was in a pit, then a prison, before he stood before the throne. David was anointed and then hunted for years before he sat in the seat that was always his. The wilderness is not the evidence that the promise failed. The wilderness is the consistent pattern of preparation for everyone who was chosen to carry something that would outlast them. You are in that pattern. Not behind the pattern, inside it, right where you are supposed to be. Being built in the places you thought were being destroyed. Being sharpened in the seasons you thought were making you soft. Being shaped in the silence you thought meant you had been forgotten. What is coming out of this wilderness is not the same person who entered it. What is walking into the next chapter of your life is someone who has been proven, tested, stripped, and filled with the kind of substance that only comes through fire. The broken places in you are not liabilities going forward. They are the exact locations where your authority will be most concentrated, because people do not trust polished performance. They trust the voice that has been where they are, and you have been in places that will give you access to lives that a less tested person could never reach. The wilderness was not your holding cell. It was your formation ground, and the formation is nearly complete. You need to grieve the losses, not forever, but genuinely. Because one of the things that has been quietly working against your ability to move forward is the unprocessed weight of the people and things that left, and the story you have been carrying about what those departures meant about you. Someone left, and the silence afterward said something to you. A door closed, and the sound of it closing became a sentence about your value. A relationship ended, a community shifted, a person you counted on stepped back, and in the aftermath of each of those moments, you did not only lose the relationship, you lost a piece of the narrative you had built about where you were going and who was going with you. And that second loss, the loss of the story, has been harder to name than the loss of the person. But hear this now. Not every departure was a rejection. Some of what left your life was removed by God's hand. And the reason it was removed was not that you were too little, but that you were too much for that environment to hold. Not every space is built to contain what you carry. Not every relationship was designed to go the distance with your assignment. Some people are chapter companions, not lifetime companions. And when their chapter with you closes, it does not mean the book is ending. It means the story is moving into territory that required a different configuration around you. The people who left and took their noise with them made space for something. You may not have been able to see it yet, because grief has a way of filling the space before clarity can enter it. But the silence they left behind was not a void. It was an opening for relationships that are actually aligned with where you are going, rather than comfortable with where you have been. An opening for clarity about your identity that could not fully arrive while certain voices were still in your ear. An opening for the version of yourself that was being suppressed by the need to manage how others perceived you to finally begin to emerge without apology. Some of the betrayals you have experienced were painful beyond what words can easily reach. Being misunderstood by people you served, being diminished by people you trusted, being left by people you would not have left, being spoken about by people who did not know your full story. Those things left marks, and the marks are not something you are required to pretend away or spiritualize into nothingness. They were real. The pain was real. The damage to your trust was real. You are allowed to acknowledge that without it being called bitterness. Naming what happened is not the same as being defined by what happened. But here is what is also true. Every person who left your story without honoring what you brought to it was not walking away with something they were meant to keep. The gift you gave to relationships that did not honor, it was not wasted. It was witnessed. And the God who saw every moment of your faithfulness to people who were not faithful in return has not overlooked the economy of that giving. What was poured out without return was not lost. It was recorded. And the restoration of what you gave without receiving will not be partial. It will be complete. And it will come from sources and through doors that you could not have predicted. The ones who left were not all losses. The ones who stayed quiet when you needed them to speak were not all failures of relationship. Some of what looked like abandonment was protection, because not everyone around you had the capacity to handle what is coming in your life, and if they had stayed, their ceiling would have become your lid. You were not left. You were freed. And the freedom that felt like grief in the moment is the very thing that creates the capacity for what is about to be added to your life in this new season. You are not rebuilding from loss. You are being repositioned for addition. And the addition that is coming into alignment around your life is the kind that is chosen, sent, aligned, and built to go the distance with the full weight of your assignment. Something has already shifted. You need to know that before anything else in this section, before any building of language or layering of meaning, something has already moved in the unseen realm on your behalf. And the reason it does not yet feel like it has is that you are standing in the in-between, the gap between the moment heaven moved and the moment earth catches up. That gap is real. It is not a sign that nothing happened. It is the space between the decree and the manifestation, and everyone who has ever walked into something significant has had to cross it. You are crossing it right now, and the crossing is not nothing, even when it feels like nothing is happening. There are things currently being aligned in your life that you cannot see and cannot control. Conversations happening about you that you have not been invited into. Doors that are in the process of opening in spaces you have not yet entered. Provision being positioned for a need you have not yet encountered. Relationships being brought into proximity to your life that will make sense when you see them, but that you could not have engineered or predicted. The unseen realm is not quiet right now. It is active. It is moving. And the instruction coming to you in this moment is not to generate more effort in the hope of creating movement. The instruction is to align yourself with a movement that has already begun. What does alignment look like in practical terms? It looks like releasing the agreements you have made with the old narrative. It looks like stopping the internal conversation that rehearses the evidence of delay as proof of denial. It looks like beginning to carry yourself according to what has been declared, rather than according to what you can currently see. This is not denial of your reality. It is the refusal to give your reality more authority than the word that was spoken over your life. Every person who has ever walked into a significant shift in their story had to make a decision to move before the evidence arrived. Not blindly, not irrationally, but with the specific, grounded confidence of someone who knows who gave them the word and what that source's track record looks like. The shift that is in motion right now is not the kind that arrives like an event you simply observe. It is the kind that requires your active participation through the posture you choose to carry in this season. Not performance, not religious activity undertaken in the hope of accelerating the timeline, but the quiet, daily, bone-deep decision to agree with what heaven has said about you more than you agree with what the last few years have taught you to believe. That decision, made consistently and without fanfare, is the thing that aligns a life with a move of God that has already been set in motion. You may have been in a posture of waiting that has slowly turned into a posture of resigned inactivity. You stopped anticipating because anticipation had been disappointed too many times, and the self-protective move was to simply stop expecting so that you could stop being hurt. That is understandable. That is the natural result of a long season of unanswered longing. But the posture of closed expectation is the one thing that can create friction between you and a shift that is genuinely underway. God is not asking you to perform enthusiasm you do not feel. He is asking you to open your hands, to release the tightly held position of self-protection, and to allow the possibility, even the small, fragile, barely lit possibility, that what He said is still true and still moving in your direction. The shift is already in motion. The decree has already been issued. The unseen realm is already responding to something that was settled about your life before this season began. What is required of you now is not a great leap of faith performed in public. It is a quiet, interior yes spoken between you and the God who interrupted your day to deliver this word. A yes that says you believe the shift is real even before your eyes confirm it. A yes that stops rehearsing the evidence of delay and starts rehearsing the character of the one who made the promise. That yes, spoken quietly and meant sincerely, is the alignment that closes the gap between the decree and the moment your life begins to move in the direction it was always meant to go. Before you decide anything, hear my voice one last time. Not the voice of this message as performance, not the language of inspiration designed to move you emotionally and then release you back into the same life unchanged. Hear this as the voice of a word that was sent for you specifically, arriving in the exact moment you needed it, through an interruption that was not random. Hear it as the final thing that needs to be said before you make the choice that is quietly waiting at the edge of this moment. Because there is a decision hovering over your life right now. You know what it is. You have been carrying it for longer than this message has been playing. And before you make it, before you turn back or step forward or stay frozen in the familiar safety of the in-between, you need to hear this. You are chosen, not as a comfort phrase, not as a motivational offering for the moments when you feel too low to keep going. Chosen as a permanent, sealed, irrevocable declaration made about your life before you had a history and before anyone could evaluate your track record. Chosen not because you are the most qualified or the most consistent or the most polished, but because the one who chooses does not choose based on the criteria that the world uses to determine value. He looks at something in you that cannot be manufactured, cannot be bought, and cannot be trained into existence. He looks at the thing He placed in you Himself before you arrived, and He calls it worthy. He calls it ready. He calls it chosen. And He is not wrong. But being chosen does not exempt you from the decision. The children of Israel were chosen, and they still had to step into the Jordan before it parted. David was anointed, and he still had to walk onto the battlefield. Esther was positioned, and she still had to go into the king. The choosing is the foundation. The decision is what you build on it. And right now, the decision that is waiting for you is not a complex one, even though Everything in your past has conspired to make it feel impossible. The decision is simply this: will you take God at His word for this next season, or will you use the evidence of the last season to make the case that the word no longer applies to you? Comment, "I receive it," in the comments right now if you are making the decision to take God at His word. Let that comment be more than engagement. Let it be the moment you plant a flag in the ground and say that regardless of what you cannot see, and regardless of what the last few years have taught you to expect, you are choosing to agree with what heaven has declared over your life. And if something you have heard today has touched a place in you that needed to be reached, and if you feel genuinely led to support the work behind this ministry, you are warmly welcome to do so. The link is there for you, freely and without any pressure. Your support, given only from a willing heart, helps this word keep week after week reaching the person who is in the middle of something, who was never meant to stay in the middle, who needed to be interrupted by a voice that knew their name. That is the work your giving sustains. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, this is the moment. Subscribe now so that the next word that was prepared for you reaches you before you need it rather than after. Stay connected to the flow of what God is releasing through this ministry. The message you need is often the one waiting just ahead. You are not who the last season said you were. You are not the sum of what was taken from you or what failed to arrive when you expected it. You are the person who was called out of something ordinary and placed into something sacred before you had the words to describe it. You are the person heaven stopped to speak to in the middle of an ordinary day. You are the one the enemy worked overtime to stop, because what is in you was always worth stopping. You are the chosen one, not someday. Not once you improve, right now. Exactly as you are, standing in the middle of the in-between, carrying what you have carried, having survived what you survived. This is not the end of your story. This is the moment just before the turn. And I need you to know, before you close this message and go back to the world that is waiting for you, that the God who interrupted your day to speak to you is not finished with what He started in your life. The word is still standing. The assignment is still sealed. The shift is already in motion, and you were always going to make it to this moment. Before you go, stay just a moment longer. Not for another word of instruction, not for another layer of spiritual weight, but simply to be still in what just happened to you, because something happened. You were pulled out of something ordinary and placed in front of a word that knew your name. That is not a thing that occurs every day. That is not the product of a search engine or a recommendation feed. That was a divine appointment, dressed in the ordinary clothing of a video on a screen, arriving at a moment that was more significant than it appeared from the outside. Everything this message has spoken to you, the interruption that was arranged, the burden you were never meant to carry alone, the assignment that could not be canceled, the wilderness that was preparing you rather than punishing you, the losses that were clearing a path rather than closing a door, the shift that has already moved in the unseen realm, and the voice that reached you one last time before you decided. All of it has been building toward this single closing truth. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone in this. And the one who placed the word over your life, before you were born, has not looked away from you for a single moment of the hardest season you have ever walked through. You are going to step forward, not because this message told you to, but because somewhere in the last hour, something in you was reminded of what you actually are and what was actually placed on your life. And that reminder does not leave easily. It settles. It takes up residence in the places that had gone quiet, and it begins to speak again with the patient, unstoppable voice of a call that was never canceled. Carry this word with you, not as a memory of a message you watched, but as a stone of remembrance that marks the day you were interrupted by heaven and chose to receive what heaven was offering. The road ahead is not without difficulty, but you are not walking it as the same person who began watching this message. Something has shifted in you. Something has opened. And what comes through that opening is going to be worth every day of the season that brought you here. You are chosen. You were always chosen. Now go and live like it.